Hey, why won't either of you answer me? I cried as I pleaded with my husband and daughter. It had been a month since they started ignoring me. My heart had reached its breaking point. I didn't know what started it. By the time I realized, I was being ignored by my husband and daughter. In our home, my presence was non-existent, as if I was invisible. Hey Dad, did you hear something? Not really, must be your imagination. My daughter and husband kept bullying me like that. Even though my voice was clearly audible and I was in plain sight, they treated me as if I was non-existent. I couldn't take it anymore, so I decided to run away from home. 5 years later, my revenge was achieved in an unexpected way. My name is Natalie Smith. I'm 50 years old. I was just an ordinary stay-at-home mom living with my husband and daughter. I married Jackson, my husband, 23 years ago. We were both 27 and colleagues at the same company back then. We working in IT with a decent income. We lived comfortably without worrying about money, and when I turned 30, we had our daughter Ruby. She was born healthily and grew up healthy without any major illnesses. I became a stay-at-home mom when Ruby was born. I was planning to return to work after a year of maternity leave, but Jackson refused. Natalie, you don't need to go back to work, do you? Why's that? I think I should work considering Ruby's future. You know my salary is good, right? I can support you and Ruby on my own. But isn't it better to save up? We've both worked hard and saved plenty, right? I want you to just focus on our daughter and things at the home. Well, after many discussions, I decided to quit my job. That marked the beginning of my days filled with parenting and household chores. To be honest, until Lena was born, I had no idea how hard parenting could be. Constant sleep deprivation due to feeding every few hours left me dazed, with no appetite. But I had to keep up nutrition for Ruby's sake. Perfecting household chores on top of that was quite challenging. I'd try to finish the household chores while Ruby was asleep, but mostly, due to lack of sleep, I'd end up sleeping alongside her. Jackson wasn't completely unhelpful, but he wasn't exactly eager to cooperate either. He'd only dote on Ruby when she was in a good mood, and hand her off to me as soon as she started crying. And so the days went on. In the blink of an eye, Ruby turned 16. After her sweet 16 party, she said something to me. Hey Mom, I didn't have a photographer for my party, right? Well, you didn't want to rent a dress, so we ended up buying a new one, remember? That's why we didn't have a photographer. What? Why not? All my friends had one. I mean, you can't hire a photographer for free, you know. That shouldn't matter to me as a kid. Isn't that something parents should handle? Ruby. Just then, Jackson came home from work. He noticing the tense atmosphere, he asked, "What's going on?" Ruby said in a whiny voice, "Listen, Dad, all my friends had a photographer for their sweet 16 parties, and I was the only one who didn't. And Mom's making excuses, saying it's because I didn't want to rent a dress." Is that what was said? Poor thing. Of course, you'd want one if all your friends had it. Exactly. I knew you'd understand, Dad. I'll hire a photographer for you to have a photo shoot in your dress. I'll cover the costs. Really? Thank you, Dad. I love you. Ruby turned to me, snorted, and walked out of the living room. I couldn't help but confront Jackson, who was all too willing to spoil Ruby. Hold on a minute. Why do you decide things like that on your own? What's the big deal? It's just pictures. Just pictures. Do you have any idea how much it costs to get those photos taken? It would be over $1,000. It can't be helped. Ruby wants to do it. Besides, shouldn't you be the one to pay for that? Shocked by Jackson's unexpected suggestion, I blurted out, "What?" He then said sarcastically, "I'm the one providing for the family, you know. You don't contribute to the living expenses." That's true, but since Ruby was born, most of her necessities have been paid from my savings. Shut up. You just do only as I say. What do you mean? I'm not the maid of this house. Then leave. How are you going to survive now, being jobless? Hada. With a mischievous grin, Jackson would say such things. As frustrating as it was, what he said wasn't entirely wrong. Even after Ruby grew up, Jackson kept finding reasons to make me give up on going back to work, so I was still without an income. My savings, which were close to $100,000 when we got married, have dwindled to under $20,000. If I left the house now, living on my own would be difficult. That thought silenced me. I bit my lower lip as Jackson triumphantly told me, "You can't live without me. Understand? Now, do as you're told. Okay. Don't talk back to me ever again. Make sure you hire a photographer for Ruby's photo shoot, okay?" Yes. He discarded his suit and headed straight for the bathroom. As I hung up his suit, anger began to bubble within me. What was that all about? How much more would Ruby and Jackson belittle me? I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom forever. After much thought, I decided to start working from home for just-in-case scenarios. Jackson said, "Do whatever you want." So I started working a job that would fit within our tax bracket. The photo shoot for Ruby ended up costing $1,500. She insisted on getting the largest printed picture and requested all the photo data, hence the price. Looking at the printed picture, Ruby exclaimed, "Ick, I look terrible in this. I'm way cuter than that." "Don't say that. The photographer really put in the effort to take this shot for you. Maybe it was that studio's fault in the first place, right? It's on you, Mom, for picking that place." "What? It was the only place available on the day you were free. Stop making excuses. I don't think I'll ever look at this picture again, so just put it away somewhere." "What do you mean?" I muttered, my voice quivering with anger and sorrow, feeling like I was about to yell at her. But as a mother, I thought I shouldn't get emotional at times like this. I took a deep breath to calm myself, holding back tears as I went to the kitchen. But I hadn't realized it yet. The real hell was yet to come. The next day, I prepared breakfast as usual, but Jackson and Ruby never came down. Just as I was about to go up and check on them, I heard them chatting and coming down the stairs. "Hey Dad, where are we going for breakfast?" How about that cafe in front of the station? I heard their breakfasts are famous." "No. I want to go there." "All right, let's go then." They put on their shoes and opened the front door. Confused, I blurted out, "Hold on a second. Your breakfast is ready. Do you hear me? Breakfast is ready. Ruby, let's go." The front door slammed shut, and their cheerful voices faded into the distance. I couldn't understand what was happening, but one thing was certain. I had been ignored by Jackson and Ruby. And it wasn't just once. No matter how many times I called out, I was ignored. What was going on? They couldn't have just not heard me, right? Why would both of them do such a thing suddenly? I had thought it might be a whim, but I was too naive. That evening, they returned home at the same time. They had gone out for dinner together, paying no mind to the dishes I had laid out, and each went straight to their own rooms. The next day, and the day after that, this same pattern continued, and my heart was steadily breaking. A month had passed since they started ignoring me. Not only was there no change in Jackson and Ruby's behavior, but that day, completed divorce documents were placed in the living room. What's this supposed to mean? I asked Jackson, but as usual, I was completely ignored. They were both happily eating pizza and watching a movie. That's when it hit me. The complex emotions I had been holding back reached their limit. In a panic, I managed to speak up. "Hey, why? Why aren't you both answering me?" Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded for an answer, but there was no reply. They just kept laughing and watching the movie, ignoring me completely. I didn't know what had triggered this. By the time I realized it, I was being ignored by my husband and daughter, who were supposed to be my family. In our home, my presence was non-existent, as if I was invisible. "Hey Dad, did you hear something?" "Not really, must be your imagination." They kept bullying me like that. Even though my voice was clearly audible, and I was in plain sight, they treated me as if I was non-existent. I couldn't take it anymore. Clutching the divorce documents, I packed the bare necessities into my carry-on, and left the house without a word. I headed to my parents' house, about an hour away by train. Thankfully, my parents are still alive, and enjoying their retired life. They were shocked to see me turn up out of the blue with big luggage, but they welcomed me with open arms once I explained the situation. "I see, you've had it rough. Sorry we didn't notice." Natally, it must have been hard. You can stay here until you feel settled, okay? My parents' kind words made me cry. That day, for the first time in decades, I cried my heart out. The next day, I filed the divorce documents and went back to using my maiden name, switching from Smith to Adams. I felt a twinge of loneliness but managed to calm my emotions. And then, I began job hunting. It was quite a daunting task. I had left work at 30 and had a 20-year gap in my employment history. Now at 50, I wondered if there was a place for me in the workforce. However, to my gratitude, I got hired on the spot by the first company I applied to. They hired me because the company I used to work for is a well-known company, and soon I was entrusted with work. 5 years later, I had gotten the hang of my job and was now handling key responsibilities. I had also started training newbies 3 years ago, and in particular, I built a good relationship with a male colleague named Harris. He was the same age as Ruby, so I could relate to him like his son. Conversely, his mom was about my age, and we hit it off talking about everything from work to personal stuff. Harris was in his 3rd year with the company. One day, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked casually, and he replied with a shy grin. "I'm getting married and I really want you to come to my wedding." "Well, congratulations. I'd love to attend." "Great, thank you." When I got home and looked at the invitation, I couldn't believe my eyes. In the bride's spot was none other than my daughter Ruby's name. Ruby Smith. You're kidding, right? Is it a coincidence? Just then, my phone rang. It was Jackson calling. "Hello. It's been a while. You doing okay? What do you want?" "Don't be so prickly. Ruby's getting married. So, come to the wedding." "What are you talking about? I'm divorced, and we're not a couple anymore." "Sorry, but I can't think of Ruby as my daughter." "What are you talking about? Just come, okay? I'll send the invitation to your parents' house." Jackson said that and hung up the phone. I had absolutely no intention of attending Ruby's wedding as the mother of the bride. However, I had told Harris that I would be there. Declining the invitation now would be rude, I thought. With that in mind, I decided to attend as the groom's boss. On the day of the wedding, 2 months later, I sat with my colleagues as a guest on the groom's side. The ceremony itself was to be private with just the bride and groom, and guests would join for the reception. There was one empty seat in the family seat. It seemed Jackson had not yet noticed me. The introductory movie for the bride and groom ended and they started greeting each table. Harris came to my table, greeted me with joy. "Thank you for coming today." Next to him, Ruby's face turned pale with her eyes wide in shock. Seeing this, Jackson's face also went pale, and he stormed over. "What is going on? Why are you sitting there?" While he asked, breathless, all eyes in the venue turned to us. Then Harris, having watched everything, asked curiously, Excuse me, do you know Ms. Adams by any chance?" "Well, she's Ruby's mother." "What? But I was told Ruby's mother abandoned the family and left." Well, that's..." It seemed Jackson and Ruby had painted me as the villain in a convenient story they told Harris. As they stood there with guilty looks on their faces, I set the record straight. "Harris, I'm sorry for not telling you the truth. I'm Ruby's mother." "Ms. Adams, did you abandon Ruby and your husband? Is that true?" "That's not the case. I was treated like nothing more than a housekeeper by my husband and daughter, and ultimately, I was ignored at home." "Ignored?" "Yes. It went on for a month, and I reached my breaking point. The divorce documents were already prepared by him, so I took them and left the house. It wasn't me who left, they rejected me outright." "Hey, Ruby. What's this about? Why did you ignore your mom?" Then Ruby, losing her cute smile, retorted defiantly. "Because everything about her was annoying. So, I decided with Dad to ignore her. She left after just 1 month. That's hilarious, right?" "Ruby, are you serious?" "It's fine. It won't bother you. Just think of me as not having a mother." Ruby managed to flash a smile again, as if nothing had happened. In stark contrast, Harris's face was flushed with anger. "What are you saying? This is no joke. I had no idea you were this kind of person." As Harris raised his voice in anger, Ruby, with rounded eyes, said, "Huh." She probably never expected Harris to take my side. With a cold voice, Harris shook off Ruby's arm. "This engagement is off. I'm glad I saw your true colors before we officially get married." "What? Wait a minute. You're joking, right? Don't touch me. I don't ever want to speak with someone as mean as you again. The wedding is cancelled." "No way." Harris took the microphone and apologized to the guests, "I'm very sorry," and encouraged them to take their gifts back and head home. "Wait a minute, everyone. Don't leave." As Ruby cried out with tears, everyone left the venue with cold stares. Just as I was about to follow them out, Jackson yelled at me, "Hey, Natalie. Do something." "Huh? Why should I? It's your fault, isn't it? You ruined Ruby's wedding, and you don't feel sorry about that." Jackson was pleading desperately, but I couldn't help but burst out laughing. "What's so funny?" he shouted, getting angrier, and I shot back just as fiercely. "Well, I don't feel the slightest bit sorry for Ruby. After all, you two have brought it on yourself, right? You deserve it. What about Ruby's marriage? I don't care. But I'm glad. Harris, my valuable team member, doesn't have to marry such a scumbag. He deserves someone much better. So, goodbye. I won't see you ever again." With that, I left the venue without looking back. I felt a sense of clear relief wash over me. Later on, Harris and Ruby's engagement was called off. It turned out Ruby was originally a temp worker and seemed to have planned to quit her job for marriage. Without a job, and dumped by her fiancé, Ruby began splurging on designer items due to stress. Now, Jackson is desperately dipping into his savings to support Ruby. That kind of lifestyle can't last forever. The destruction of the two of them is clearly in sight. With this, I've shed those nagging feelings. From now on, I want to live life to the fullest, just for my own happiness. Having poor folks around makes even good food taste bad. The food here is too fancy for you, isn't it? Admit that you're out of place and just go home already, LOL. Sneered my former classmate James upon seeing me. Though he's the one making a scene, he's the one who doesn't fit in here. I tried to speak up to shut James up, thinking about the inconvenience to the shop. But my wife, sitting next to me, stopped me from speaking. Someone rude enough to say that on first meeting deserves to be fired. When my wife said that, James tilted his head in confusion. Meanwhile, my wife continued to glare at James with eyes full of anger. Seeing my wife like that, I sensed James's life had hit its end right then and there. "My name's Ethan. I've been working at the same company I joined as a new grad for over 10 years, now a 35-year-old man. Thankfully, I've been highly regarded by HR, currently holding the position of department head. With responsibilities within the department, my workload is quite heavy, to be honest. However, I find fulfillment in it. I have a wife, and we've been happily married for 5 years now. Although we were not blessed with children, neither of us was in much of a hurry, as we both love our jobs. I grew up in a single-parent household due to my parents' divorce when I was young. I imagine it was tough for my mother to raise me single-handedly. Wanting to give my hard-working mother a better life, I devoted myself to studying. I thought if I studied hard and went to a good university, I could work for a reputable company and earn a good income. My mother, despite working multiple part-time jobs, supported me through university, covering my tuition fees, and I'm forever grateful to her. In order to repay the kindness of raising me, I have been sending money to my mother every month since I graduated from college and started working. However, I must say, the amount is quite minimal. Because my mother, out of concern for me, said that the minimum amount would suffice. We weren't wealthy, but I was proud of my mother. But there was one awful person who mocked me for being poor. His name is James, who has been looking down on me since we were first-year middle school students together. Poor people can't even afford to take a bath. You make the whole classroom stink just by being here. To save on water and gas bills, I only bathed in the tub 2 to 3 times a week. But I showered and washed myself thoroughly every day. Yet, James's ostentatious nose pinching made me wonder if I truly smelled bad. At one point, I scrubbed my body so hard that it turned bright red, and noticing the change, my mother, worried, reassured me countless times that everything was okay. James persistently harassed me even after that. During our lunch break at school, he would go out of his way to come up to my seat and say, "Your lunchbox is as plain as ever. This is mostly frozen food, isn't it?" And took my lunch to show it off to the class. Many classmates were unhappy with James's behavior, but he was also a leader figure in the class, and moreover, his father worked for a well-known company. Furthermore, the teachers turned a blind eye, allowing James's behavior to escalate. Unable to tolerate his repeated harassment, there was a time I resisted. "You ridicule me for being poor, but maybe it's your heart that's impoverished because you couldn't learn how to interact with people from your parents." My words made James's face turn red with anger, and from there, the harassment worsened. Since then, I become socially awkward. I always had a gloomy look on my face because I was looked down upon every day and had no confidence in myself. Especially with women, I had no luck. I had many opportunities to get involved with them due to my work, but each time I blamed myself, wondering if should talk to them. However, a turning point came for me. One of my few friends introduced me to a woman who would become my wife in the future. My friend, busy with work to support his parents, noticed my lack of interest in the opposite sex and forcibly arranged a date for me, saying it would be fine to meet her just once. Without the time or opportunity to persuade him otherwise, I reluctantly dressed up for the date. My wife's first impression was that she was a cool woman. For my insecure self, she was the complete opposite, and I couldn't help but be captivated. Not flashy, but admiring her in a quality dress and sharp features, wife blushed shyly. Seeing her gesture, I somehow felt a sense of destiny. Then, after going out for meals several times, we started dating. About a year later, we decided to get married. When I asked why she thought marrying me was a good idea, my wife smiled and replied, "I saw how diligent you were in your work. I thought we had similar values, and I fell in love with the way you looked at people's inner lives and praised them." For me, who had been living recklessly, her words felt like validation for my entire life. As I tearfully expressed my emotions, my wife gently stroked my head. I'll never forget the warmth of her hands at that moment. With the additional reasons of filial piety and life with my wife, I worked even harder. Amidst this, I was offered a promotion at work. The old me might have lacked confidence and declined, but now I happily accepted and became a department head. My wife also works, so we have plenty of financial flexibility, but since neither of us are materialistic, we save most of it. However, since this year was our 5th year of marriage, we decided to make our anniversary extravagant. After planning, we booked a room at a luxury hotel and made dinner reservations. Since becoming a department head, I hadn't been able to date much, so after finalizing plans, I eagerly went to work every day. And then, on the night of our anniversary, I wore the special suit I had worn when I proposed to my wife and entered the hotel with my wife, who was even more beautifully dressed than usual. Feeling nervous in an unfamiliar setting, my wife smiled at me. "You look so tense. It's our anniversary dinner. You need to relax a bit more." "Yeah, you're right." As I nervously replied, I glanced around the restaurant. Then, a man approached me. Well, isn't that Puifin? Are you James?" With a friendly pat on the shoulder, James looked down on me. "Wearing such a fancy suit. Could it be that you become a trophy husband of the lady next to you? LOL. James's giggling made me flash back to my memories of that time. Repeated, relentless harassment, a bitter memory where my self-esteem was completely stripped away. I would have preferred to keep them locked away forever. As I struggled to breathe, unable to respond, James tilted his head mockingly. "You still can't say anything back, huh? You're the same as you were back then. Nothing's changed, LOL. By the way, I'm working at that famous company now, living the opposite of your dull life, LOL." James proudly handed me his business card. Before I could even look at it, my wife snatched it away. "Oh, dear. Are you trying to upgrade from someone like him to me? Well, if your husband is this guy, it's no wonder, huh? LOL. Ignoring James's words, my wife stared at the business card. Then, with a faint smile, she spoke up. "Well, you are working for that company, right? How can such a person make belittling remarks about others at the beginning of an encounter? It's a shame for a famous company to lose its name, isn't it? At my wife's words, James's eyebrows twitched. Showing his displeasure blatantly, James started shouting, "If you're married to him, you're just like him, huh? With a poor guy around, even this good meal tastes bad. The food here is too good for you, so why don't you just go home and have some cheap boxed lunch instead? LOL. My wife glared back at James. Thinking it would be best not to cause any more trouble for the restaurant, I tried to speak up despite my trembling body. But my wife stopped me. Then, she whispered to me, so only I could hear, to leave it to her. A person who lacks common sense and is rude like you could potentially cause significant losses for the company. I'm afraid I'll have to fire you immediately." My wife's statement left both me and James dumbfounded. However, I quickly understood the situation. No way, the company James works at. Yes, that company. I didn't expect you to disclose where you work, but... As we conversed, James became visibly annoyed and raised his voice. "What the hell have you been talking about all this time? Are you just a bitter, sore loser?" Wife sighed deeply at James's lack of understanding of his own position. "Let me explain it in terms even someone like you can understand. The company you work for is actually owned by my father." Upon hearing wife's words, James's face turned pale. "No way, that can't be true. If you don't believe me, that's fine. But I'll make sure to report this to my father." Ignoring James's agitation, my wife started eating the dishes that had been brought over. I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for James. He would not expect that the wife of the person he was abusing is the daughter of the president of the company he works for. However, that didn't justify his behavior. Even if he had nothing to do with me and wife, with his attitude, James would likely end up getting fired in the near future. As we silently continued eating, James clung to us. "There's no way you'd marry the president's daughter. This has to be a bluff." Despite his words, James's hands were shaking uncontrollably. He might have heard somewhere that the president had a daughter. "Since you're disturbing our anniversary celebration, please leave. Don't act all high and mighty." Wife's cold words triggered James, who suddenly lunged at her. I instinctively shielded wife and took James's fist to my back. "This is a serious assault. You attacked me in front of all these people. There are plenty of witnesses." After hearing my words, James finally seemed to realize what he had done and tried to escape. However, the restaurant staff had already called security, and he was quickly apprehended. In the end, James was taken away by the police. The anticipated anniversary turned into a turbulent one. Though I felt sorry for my wife, she comforted me, asking not to worry. He got arrested for assault, saved me the trouble of reporting to my father. I gazed at my wife, who sighed deeply, and asked her a question. "Why did you keep your identity as the president's daughter a secret? Even when we visited your parents, they didn't mention anything." "Well, I was actually planning to tell you today. You see, because I've always been treated specially as the president's daughter, everyone I dated before only cared about my money in the end. So, I came to believe that I had no self-worth. But you changed that for me." As she spoke, my wife tightly held my hand. It seemed that just as meeting my wife changed my values, meeting me allowed her to acknowledge herself. I embraced my wife, conveying 5 years' worth of love in that moment. Upon learning that my wife was the president's daughter, we went to visit my in-laws again. My wife revealing this was apparently a joyous occasion for my in-laws. From a very young age, I put her through a life of constant pressure. There were times when she would come to me in tears, saying she was afraid to trust other people. "Ethan is such a wonderful person that this girl believes in." My father-in-law's words made me feel awkward, and I shifted uncomfortably while smiling shyly. "So, what happened to that guy, James?" After chatting for a while, my wife brought up the topic to my father-in-law. It was something I had been curious about for sure. While it was certain that he would have a criminal record for assault, I hadn't seen his condition directly. My FIL's expression became a little grim. Then he began to talk about the outcome James faced. My Phil heard that after the incident, James wouldn't be able to go to work for a while. Apparently, James didn't mention anything about causing a disability incident. He was trying to get through it with excuses like having to care for his parents, or some other lame excuses. My Phil became suspicious of this sudden change, but soon he learned from online news that James had caused a disability incident. The scene of James causing a scene at the luxury hotel was captured by other angry customers, ruining the special day. The video posted on social media spread like wildfire, even making it to the online news. Of course, the news was discovered by the business partners, who demanded that James cease business with them, saying that they had long been dissatisfied with James's coercive attitude at meetings. There were also criticisms blaming the company for letting such a person loose, so My Phil conducted an internal investigation. It turned out that James had been giving new employees excessive workloads resembling harassment. Even now as an adult, it seems he could only live by looking down on others. Now that they are strangling themselves, it is a case of karma and retribution. James was immediately fired for causing significant losses to the company. When the dismissal was decided, the newcomers, who had been treated so poorly by James, cheered. If he had grown up a bit, he might not have faced such consequences. Given his pride, even if he became a criminal and lost his job, he probably wouldn't let go of the title of working for a famous company. He could foresee being rejected at interviews with big corporations time and again. It may seem insensitive, but I thought it served him right for the payback he received from his student days. A month after the incident, my wife complained of chronic nausea, so I took her to the hospital. We were worried it might be a serious illness, but the doctor gave us some surprising news. A new life was blossoming in my wife's belly. My wife and I held hands in joy. I'm thinking of putting even more effort into my work from now on, since we'll probably end up spending the savings my wife and I have been accumulating for our unborn child. Hey, Laura. Where the heck are you right now? There's no need for me to tell you. That's impossible. Look, this eyes, Katie's portrait, and even her urn. It seemed my husband and sister rushed back to the States earlier than planned after hearing the news from me. What the two saw when they hurriedly returned home was Katie's funeral. I'm Laura, a 34-year-old housewife. I've been with my husband Archie since college. After dating for 7 years, we got married and now have a 5-year-old daughter named Leah. Archie often works late, leaving me and Leah alone till late night. I'm always swamped with house chores and taking care of Leah. Life was routine until my younger sister Linda started visiting us frequently. Up until now, no matter how many times I asked her to come and visit me, she would simply refuse me, saying, "I'm too busy to take care of my daughter." At first, I assumed she needed a break from her housewife role. However, I began to notice a pattern. Linda would only come when Archie was home, and spent most of her time chatting with him. I tried to brush it off as them just being close. Still, I couldn't help but feel their closeness was excessive. As expected, I, who has been called insensitive by people around me for a long time, began to feel suspicious, so I checked my husband's smartphone while he was sleeping. To my surprise, there was a folder packed with photos of Linda and my husband together. Among them, there were pictures of them in bed, with barely anything on, hugging each other. I was so angry I wanted to wake Archie up and confront him right then and there, but we have a daughter together. Not wanting to create a scene because of Archie's infidelity, and thinking about our daughter, I somehow managed to suppress my explosive anger. However, now that I knew, I couldn't pretend I didn't. Instead of confronting Archie, I gently told Linda, "I'm sorry, I'd rather you not come to our house anymore." When I did, the words that came back from my younger sister were, "What? Are you jealous because you think your hubby might get stolen?" What's more, the fact she said it with a half smile on her face made me realize I was quite upset without even noticing. "You've already stolen him. Oh my. Did you notice? Why not just divorce him? I'll have him." "Stop joking. I'm serious. Don't you realize that you're becoming an old lady? What? Just look at yourself. Even when Archie's home, you don't wear makeup or dress up. You're turning into an old woman. I'm busy looking after our young daughter and doing all the housework. I don't have time to worry about myself. I have a daughter younger than Leah too, you know. You see how I'm all dolled up with makeup and looking stylish, right? That's probably because your husband does all the housework for you, isn't it?" "Oh, here come the excuses. What did you say?" Keep getting angry like that and you'll get even more wrinkles. You're just speeding up the process of becoming an old woman." The more she said, the more I realized she was just trying to provoke me. Sure, if I had a husband like Linda's, who did all the housework and child care, I'd also have time for myself. But that's not the case in our home. Just because I'm a housewife, Archie leaves his socks everywhere, doesn't put away his bag, and doesn't even bring his used dishes to the kitchen. Every day, I run around cleaning up after him and taking care of our daughter, who bumps into furniture and cries. How on earth does she claim to have time in such a busy life to spend just for herself like a younger sister? What my sister was saying was, quite frankly, a pat on her own back, but by now, she must have realized why I didn't want her coming over. Still, she didn't stop visiting. Instead, ever since that day, she became even bolder, getting cozy with Archie right in front of me. Every day was a struggle to keep my temper in check. It was on one of those days, out of the blue, my husband decided to take paid time off from work and announced he wanted to go on a 5-night, 6-day trip to Guam. I was momentarily hopeful it might be a family trip with our daughter and me, but then, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, he said, "I'm going with Linda. In the meantime, you should also take good care of Linda's daughter, Katie." Without even looking at me, my husband said this and began making a call. The person he gleefully dialed was, of course, my sister, Linda. Even though I was right there listening, he excitedly started sharing the news. "Hey, Linda, I got the time off, so look forward to the trip to Guam next week." "Huh, sounds great. I just got my bonus, so feel free to buy lots of souvenirs. Yeah, I told Laura to look after Katie, so you can leave her without any worries. It's fine. Laura's only good for housework and taking care of the kids anyway." Hearing that, I felt like bursting into tears and quickly dashed to the bathroom. I didn't want my husband to see me cry. I had reached my breaking point with being looked down upon like this. I had endured so much, hoping our daughter would grow up with both her parents, but I couldn't stand being trampled upon any longer, both as a wife and as a human being. If I become servile because of my husband and sister like this, how would I feel if Leah grew up seeing me who could only put up with being oppressed? I felt a surge of determination to stand up for myself. I didn't want our daughter to see her mother being mistreated and think it's okay to endure such things. I realized it was time to take a stand. From that day on, I started preparing while Archie was at work. I visited a lawyer with the evidence of his affair, which I had transferred to my computer. I talked to both our parents and my in-laws about the situation and what I planned to do. I also found a job and a new apartment, and on the day Archie and Linda left for their trip, I waved them off with a big smile. During that time, I took care of my sister Linda's daughter, Katie, and something seemed off. It had been since Linda gave birth to Katie that I had last seen her, so I was shocked at how thin Katie had become, being just a year older than my daughter. The clothes she was wearing were too small and looked as if they hadn't been washed in ages. Her hair was all sweaty and sticky, and parts of her skin were dark with dirt. Having a warm meal, taking a warm bath, and sleeping in a cozy bed seemed like luxuries to her. It seems that such a normal thing was not a matter of course, and when I served freshly cooked rice on the first day, he looked at my complexion and did not even try to eat it. When I gave her a bath, her body was covered in bruises. Unaware of my shock, she happily exclaimed, "I never knew baths could be this warm." It seemed like she was always given cold baths, and when I washed her hair and body, she looked puzzled, asking, "What are you doing?" She probably hadn't been bathed properly before. After the bath, when I changed her into pajamas, Katie was overjoyed. "Cute clothes. Can I really wear these?" "Yes, honey. I bought them especially for you." "Oh, thank you. I can't believe someone like me gets something so nice." Once again, I was taken aback. I couldn't believe a 4-year-old would be so mature in expressing gratitude. Even my almost 5-year-old daughter could barely say thank you. While my daughter was at preschool, I decided to ask Katie about her home life. Given how different her reactions were from my daughter's, I could only think of one possibility. "Hey, Katie. Yis. How's life at home? Does your dad take care of you?" "And no. I'm always alone." "Alone? Yeah. My mom and dad are always away. Do you know what they're doing? I don't know. But every time they come home, they get mad at me. I'd rather be alone. I see. I couldn't bring myself to ask her any more questions. There was no doubt in my mind. It's clear that Katie has been neglected by my sister and brother-in-law. No, even worse than that. Apparently, she had been crying without me knowing, and it was Katie who quietly handed me a nearby cloth. Katie, with a sad look on her face, asked me, "Are you hurt somewhere? Are you okay?" I'm fine. Just got something in my eye. Despite being so young, and probably having faced more hardships than me, Katie was more concerned about me than herself. I couldn't help but embrace her small frame. Katie looked at me with a puzzled expression. She probably hadn't been hugged like this before. I faced Katie and asked her seriously, "If you're okay with it, would you like to be my daughter from today?" Really? Of course. Do you like staying with Auntie and Leah? Yes. I love it. Even more than my dad and mom, way more. Katie beamed with joy and spread her arms wide to show her happiness. When I hugged her small frame again, this time Katie hesitated but eventually hugged me back. From there, my actions were swift. I took Katie to the hospital to get a medical report for her injuries, and then reported my sister and brother-in-law's child neglect to Child Welfare Services. I immediately went to a law firm to discuss custody of Katie and filed a petition with the court. By evening, I had moved to a new apartment with Leah and Katie. My sister called from her vacation, oblivious and cheerfully. Without any clue about what had transpired, she chirped, "Hey sis, everything good? You taking care of things? What do you want? I'm sunbathing on the beach right now and was just killing time." "Oh really? Thanks for taking care of Katie. You're so carefree even when I say your daughter has passed away." What did you just say? Your daughter Katie is gone. Come on, stop joking around. If you think so, check it out for yourself when you get home. Wait a sec. Ignoring my visibly shaken sister, I hung up the phone. The next afternoon, when my cell phone rang loudly, I answered it, pretending to be unaware. Furious yelling could be heard from the other end. "Hey, Laura, where the heck are you right now? There's no need for me to tell you." "That's impossible. Look, this eyes, Katie's portrait, and even her urn." It seemed my husband and sister rushed back to the States earlier than planned after hearing the news from me. What the two saw when they hurriedly returned home was Katie's funeral. There, my parents, dressed in black and wiping away tears with handkerchiefs, were present, as were my in-laws. "What's going on? I told you to properly take care of Katie, didn't I? I'll sue you for this." "Shut up, Eek." The one who yelled even louder was my mill. My husband and sister let out a short scream and shrank back. We heard everything from Laura. "What are you talking about?" My parents reprimanded my feigning sister. "You didn't properly take care of Katie, did you?" "No, that's not true. I did take care of her properly. If you had, this wouldn't have happened. First of all, where were you guys during all this?" We were on, it was a business trip." "Oh, so Archie, Laura's husband, took Linda, Laura's sister, instead of Laura. We're family. What's wrong with that? You two seem to be very close for just family." My Phil said as he scattered a pile of photos showing their affair that I had handed over in advance. Seeing this, my husband and sister froze, their eyes wide in shock. Realizing they couldn't make any more excuses, they both remained silent. So, I decided to speak to them. "Take a look inside the urn." Hearing my words, my husband and sister exchanged glances and hesitantly reached for the urn. When they peered inside, they pulled out a piece of paper with a shocked expression. "This is a divorce paper. Where are the ashes? That's in place of her ashes." "Huh? What do you mean?" "That means Katie, Linda's daughter, is dead." "No, but this." As my sister was speaking, Katie approached my side. "Mom, let's make some cookies with Leah." "Sure, honey, just give me a moment, okay?" "Katie, wait, she's right there." "Katie, she's here." "Then she's alive." "Katie, Mom's back." "Come on, Katie." "You're mistaken." "What? My real mom is Laura." What are you talking about? Laura is your aunt, and I am your real mom, right? No. My real mom is Laura. Katie, don't casually call my daughter's name. What? I am Katie's mother. I already told you, your daughter Katie passed away. She's not dead. She's right there. The one here was reborn as my daughter, Katie. Legally, Katie is no longer your daughter. What? Then what about the child support? What will happen to it? I was utterly disgusted that the last thing on her mind was money. I realized that there was really no way to save her, and that the anger I had been feeling until now was turning into a feeling of pity. I could feel this change within myself. Taking a deep sigh, I continued. The cops will be here soon, so if you have anything else to say, now is your chance. Just let the police handle it. The police. Both Archie and Lindy exclaimed in disbelief, their voices high-pitched with shock. When things get this messed up, any feelings of love for Archie just vanish. All I feel now is anger and pity. Of course, what you've done to Katie is a straight-up crime. You'll get what's coming to you. Wait, just wait a sec. We didn't do anything that bad. Katie is my daughter after all. That's where you're wrong. She's no longer your daughter. Your husband's probably already at the police station. You should join him. Wait, I've got no part in this, right? You, come here. Taking my cue, Mimel silently handed an envelope to Archie. His face turned pale as he opened it and started to sweat even more. Compensation money. For the long-term, malicious infidelity. We're taking this to civil court. Wait, it was all Linda's idea. She pushed me into it. Really? You're the one who took her up on it. I never wanted any of this. Linda forced me into it. I'm the victim here. You're just trying to save your own skin, huh? If one goes down, you both do. This is all your fault. You're the one who made me do it. Laura will understand, right? I don't want to understand. By the way, I've already signed the divorce papers. Now, you just need to sign them and submit them to the city hall. What? You didn't realize? If I'm asking for compensation, obviously I want a divorce. After all this, now divorce. What about our daughter, Leah? Don't worry. I'll raise Leah and Katie just fine on my own. This has to be a nightmare. Face reality. And I'll be asking for the child support up front. That's too much. I am Heina's father. How can you? Frankly, they're better off without a father like you. You've no right to call yourself a parent, and the same goes for Linda. I don't want either of you showing your faces to our children ever again. It's not true. It's over. Oh God. Afterwards, the police, alerted by our parents, rushed over and took the two of them to the station. My husband faced civil charges, while my sister faced both criminal and civil charges. Although my sister was given probation, you can't shut people up, and the incident became the talk of the town. I divorced my husband, who was sentenced to jail. I heard they had a falling out after some disagreements and eventually separated. To pay for the settlement, they had to sell their house, but the money wasn't enough. They tried to seek help from their parents, but were disowned. Somehow, they managed to borrow money to make the payment. Now, they're living in a cheap, run-down apartment and juggling multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet, according to my in-laws. As for me, Leah, and Katie, with the support of our in-laws and parents, we're now living peaceful and harmonious lives. Seeing the innocent, carefree smiles of our daughters, I think to myself, I hope they never grow up to be like those two. What goes around comes around.